nervous filming videos every single time I do them, and I have no idea why, because it's literally just me here. Hello. How is everyone doing today? Hopefully good. For those who are new here, hello, my name is Cheyenne, and this is my channel where we talk about true crime videos. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but my last few videos, like not this recent last one, but two before, there was like weird audio glitches, and then this last video, there was like some kind of weird visual glitch. I just can't put out a video that doesn't have something go wrong. I've used different like editing apps. I've tried everything, and there's always something that goes wrong. So if that bothers you, I'm sorry. It is what it is. Hopefully this one turns out okay, but if not, nothing I can do about it. Okay, so today is another requested video. You know, we've talked about serial killers, we've talked about doctors, and today we are going to talk about a doctor serial killer. Serial killer doctor. That makes more sense, yes. So, without further ado, let's get the show on the road. So today we are going to be talking about Dr. Harold Frederick Shipman. We're just going to be referring to him as Fred because that is his nickname that everyone called him. So Dr. Fred Shipman. So he was born on June 14th in 1946. And he was born in Nottingham, England. I didn't have that written down, so I had to go search for it. So from what I found, Dr. Shipman's childhood wasn't that normal per se. Many people report him being very distant and almost having this superiority complex. He always kept a distance between him and his classmates, and a big influence on this attitude was his mother, Vera. And one of the neighbors that lived by the family is reported as saying, Vera was friendly enough, but she really did see her family as superior to the rest of us. Not only that, you could tell Harold, Freddie, was her favorite, the one she saw as the most promising of her three children. So yes, his mother is probably the reason, or a big part of the reason as to why he had the personality that he did. So Vera actually, she controlled who Fred could play with, what children he could interact with. She had full control over his social life. He was always expected to dress up nice and wear ties, and he was expected to dress like this. Even when the rest of his siblings could dress casually, Fred was always held to a higher standard. So as a child, Fred was said to have like pretty high grades and be fairly intelligent, but the older he got, his grades became mediocre. He really wanted to be successful, and so he worked his butt off to become a doctor. It is also reported that he was very good at football, but even with his football team, normally, you're friends with the kids that are on your teams or that you're interacting with. He didn't socialize with anyone from the team, anyone from school. Like, he really had no friends. And then while Harold was in school, his mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. So obviously Harold and his mom were very close. He was the favorite, so they had a close relationship. And watching her struggle with cancer was difficult for him, naturally, as it would be for anybody. He would always run home from school and make his mom a cup of tea and sit with her for the evening, and they would chat. And it's also believed that this is where he learned his really good bedside manner. Later on in the future, when he was a doctor, was taking care of his mother. So Vera naturally was in a lot of pain towards the end of her life. I mean, she had lung cancer, and this is, I think, in the 50s or 60s. So I can't imagine medicine is that far developed, but I also don't know. So don't come for me for that, because I have no idea. Maybe they had great treatment. Doesn't seem like it. So she was in a great deal of pain. So a family physician would come by and administer morphine to her to take away the pain. And this happened while Fred was there. So Vera did die in June 1963, naturally, but it's said that these interactions with Fred, watching the family physician administer morphine and seeing his mother's pain subside, it did something to him. And just thought that all of these factors of his childhood really impacted the direction that he took. I'm talking with my hands a lot. I always talk with my hands a lot. But these factors, and I think you'll see when we get further in this story, you can kind of see where the connections are made. It's kind of strange. Yes. So 2 years after his mother died, Fred Shipman was accepted into Leeds University, where he began medical school. Now his superiority complex continued throughout all of his schooling. Classmates are reported to saying that he really believed or acted like he seemed like he thought that he was better than everybody. One of his classmates is even quoted as saying, he acted as if he just tolerated us. So there was no real friendships being developed at all. But although he didn't have friends, he did find a girl. So when he was 19, he met Primrose, who was 3 years younger than him. And she had a very similar background to Fred's. Her parents also restricted the interaction that she could have with other people, which is maybe where they had connections or where they were able to relate to one another. So they married each other when Primrose was 17, and she was also 5 months pregnant at the time. So scandalous. So by 1974, I have a dry throat, give me 1 second. So by 1974, Dr. Shipman was the father of 2 children. So we're fast forwarding a bit in the timeline, and he was practicing medicine in the Yorkshire town of Todmorden, which maybe I'm butchering, but nothing new. So once he started practicing medicine, people have described Dr. Shipman as going through this metamorphosis. He became a very well-liked, well-respected doctor in the community. Then, while he was working in Todmorden, something strange happened. Dr. Shipman started having blackouts, he said. And he was doing things like prescribing drugs to patients, and then those patients were reporting that they never got those prescriptions. And so he told his colleagues when he was questioned about it that, he had epilepsy and he was having blackouts and he had no idea what was going on. Turns out there was an investigation that happened naturally because all these drugs are going missing. And Dr. Shipman had an addiction. So he had an addiction to a drug called pethidine, which is similar to morphine from what I've read. It's like a morphine-like kind of substance. Yeah, so Dr. Shipman was using, which would also make sense why he was having blackouts if he was using drugs, especially morphine, that's a down. So it just zonks you out. So he was obviously confronted about this. Him and his colleagues got in a fight and he was fired. Naturally. Good Sir was fired for stealing drugs and using them, obviously. So in 1975, he was forced to go to a drug rehab center. He was also charged for all of these offenses, but he only had to pay a fine of £600, so pretty much nothing, especially for a doctor. That's petty change. He's a fucking doctor. Some people do question, though, this whole chain of events. They question if he was actually using these drugs on himself, or if even back in 1974, 1975, he had already begun injecting patients with these drugs. We do not know. So naturally, with his track record, you think that Dr. Shipman would not be allowed to handle drugs without supervision. False. He pretty much just got to do his thing after all of this. After 2 years, he was back in business and being a general practitioner again. So he was accepted into the Donnybrook Medical Center, which is in Hyde, which is in North England. And he was able to pretty much just convince everyone that he was better and they had nothing to worry about. He was, I guess, very good at that, which is a typical trait for serial killers. They can be very persuasive. So, he probably wasn't watched as closely as he should have been. And he was pretty much just given a free range to kill people. Nice. So, Dr. Shipman was not caught until the year 2000. So he or I guess he wasn't convicted. So he was doing this for a while, but how did he get caught? Let's talk about it. So a local undertaker, which I've never actually heard that word be used in real life. Like when I hear undertaker, I think of like the wrestler. There's like, you know, like a WWE character, I think.
The Undertaker! 320 pounds, looks to be 6'9", 6'10", somewhere in that neighborhood, Rod.
That's what I'm thinking of. So I'm gonna Google what an undertaker actually does because I have no idea, and I will put it here. Okay, now that we've learned something, let's continue. So the local undertaker, Alan Macy. Alan started to notice that there was this strange pattern happening with Dr. Shipman's patients. First of all, he noticed that tons of them were dying, which little sus. He also noticed that they were dying in similar like ways, or there was a pattern to these deaths, like they were all seeming to die seemingly the same kind of way. So he noticed that these patients were dying like either sitting in a chair or laying in a bed, and most of them were fully clothed, which he thought was weird that it was all the same way. Also, something to be noted is that there was never anything noticed in these individuals' houses that would indicate that they were sick. They all seemed like they were, you know, doing pretty well, had pretty good health. So obviously, pretty suspicious. This undertaker, Alan, decided that he was going to confront Shipman and just see what was going on. So he questioned Dr. Shipman. Dr. Shipman showed him the death certificates, and you know, everything seemed pretty legit. He was really good, again, at talking himself out of things. And so the undertaker was like, okay, I guess so. He wasn't fully convinced, and neither was the funeral director. And, you know, they were like, I guess so, but they also weren't feeling that good about it. And that is when they found an ally. And their ally was Dr. Susan Booth. So who is Dr. Booth? So Dr. Booth was from a neighboring practice, and she was basically paid to go to funeral homes and countersign on like cremation forms. It's apparently a law in Britain where doctors from an opposing practice have to come examine a body and then sign off saying, yes, like this is how the body or how the individual died. So that was her job. It's also called cash for ash, which is clever. Anyways, Dr. Booth was getting paid to re-examine these bodies and just say, yes, they're dying the way that it said they're dying. And she also thought that it was pretty suspicious that Dr. Shipman's patients were dying at the rate that they were dying. And she also started to notice a pattern too that she thought was suspicious. Again, most of his patients were females living on their own and were found dead, fully clothed, usually sitting in a chair, sometimes lying down, but they weren't in like their nightgowns or they weren't in like sleepwear, which makes sense. Like at first when I read this, I couldn't really understand the connection they were trying to make. I was like, how is that suspicious that they were fully clothed? But if you think about it, if someone's really sick, they're normally lying in bed, like in comfy clothes. You know, like you don't wear everyday clothes when you're sick. You know, I'm not gonna wear like jeans and a nice shirt. I'm gonna wear like my comfy sleepwear. So I understand how that's suspicious now. So Booth naturally found all of this suspicious and started talking to her colleagues about everything. One of her colleagues was Dr. Linda Reynolds. She ended up contacting a coroner about the information, and the coroner went and contacted the police. So I know you're thinking, wow, this is how he was stopped. No, it was not. The police did not do a very good investigation, I don't believe. Many have questioned the quality of investigation that the police performed, especially when the police didn't even check to see if Dr. Shipman had a previous medical record. They'd never even discovered that, which seems like a pretty simple thing for the police to find out. I don't know though, I'm not an officer, I don't know how it works, but they didn't make any kind of inquiry to the General Medical Council, and I mean, if they would have done that, they would have discovered Dr. Shipman's past, which may have opened this up a little better. Maybe he would have been caught a little sooner, but we will never know. Shipman wasn't caught though because he was forging his medical records after the patients had died. He would just completely lie about what had happened. But I don't know, like it seems like, I don't know, it almost seems though, like because he was a doctor, you know, people are in certain professions and they're trusted more. And maybe the police didn't investigate as thoroughly as they should have because he was a doctor. And because that is a respected profession. Keeping on. He kept on killing for a little bit. Shipman though, gets her messed up because on June 24th of 1998, Kathleen Grundy was pronounced dead. This was a huge shock to everybody that knew her. Granted, she was 81 years old, but she was very active, very fit, well known in the community. She was the ex-mayor and she worked for tons of charities, was a part of all these clubs. Like she was a very active person and a very important member of the community. So when Dr. Shipman said that she died, no one believed him. Naturally, her daughter was like, this doesn't seem right. And I mean, she was found lying down, fully clothed, just like laying there for no reason. Like there was nothing leading up to this. There was no reason for her to die. So everyone thought that this was suspicious. So they were going through Kathleen's documents, obviously. And in these documents, there was this paper. It had like lots of I'm struggling with the word grammatical. It had lots of grammatical errors. And as soon as her daughter Angela saw this, she was like, I know this is false. Also the paper, I don't know, like he kind of sucks. Like he really thought that he could just like, he was pushing the limits. I'm telling you, Shipman was pushing the limits with this one. This paper that had tons of grammatical errors said that Kathleen was going to leave him $386,000. I don't know. Maybe he just wanted to get caught. Like he's fucked. But Angela was like, my mother is meticulously tidy. She was a mayor. She's probably handled tons of documents. This woman wouldn't like put together this half-assed piece of paper. Also, her daughter noticed that the signature just did not look right. It didn't look like her mother's normal signature, which she also thought was suspicious. So I mean, I don't know, Shipman seems like he was maybe just very arrogant and thought that he could get away with this, but he dumb. So because of all this, the family got permission to have Kathleen's body exhumed for further investigation because they just knew that something was off. And she was the first of many. They exhumed a few bodies throughout the investigation to really see maybe how these individuals had died. And police also got a warrant and started searching Shipman's like office and home and all of his records, naturally. And during this search, like Shipman didn't know that they were going to start exhuming bodies. So again, it was said that he was very arrogant during this and he really thought that he wasn't going to get caught. He really thought that he was going to get away with this. And one piece of evidence that they found that really worked against Shipman was they found this typewriter. And after forensic scientists, you know, checked out this typewriter, I don't really know what they do or how they figure this out, but they found that this was the same typewriter that was used to write up that fake letter of Kathleen and like other fraudulent documents that they had started to find. So police started examining bodies, and what they found was that there were extremely high amounts of morphine in the tissues of these individuals who had died, which was something that clearly Shipman overlooked because morphine is one drug that will stay like in the body for ages and ages after an individual's died. So again, as we've seen with many killers, you think that the serial killer would be a little smarter, but they don't really think everything through. he really wasn't thinking. And again, I think he probably chose morphine because that's the drug that like his mother was given. See the connection we've made? His mother was given morphine, and that's how he was killing these women. So it's kind of creepy that he was pretty much just reliving his mom's death. They began exhuming bodies and testing them, and they all had very high levels of morphine because Shipman was coming into these women's homes, injecting them with morphine and effectively killing them. So Dr. Shipman was arrested, naturally, and charged with the murder of 15 of his patients. Now, it is believed that he murdered over 200 individuals, but if I'm understanding it correctly, they only had evidence for 15 of those patients. So he was charged, went to trial, and on January the 31st of the year 2000, Dr. Shipman was found guilty of all 15 cases of murder. I just also want to note that this trial was 57 days long, which seems like a lot. Granted, there's like 15 victims is a lot, but 57 days of just the trial. Like, that's insane to me. That's long. And there was a professor, I guess, that looked into this case. And so, yeah, he found that Shipman had 236 more patients die than the average doctor. So lots. Like, he probably murdered tons of people. Tons. It's insane. So yeah, Shipman was put in jail, and then in 2004 he ended up killing himself in his Wakefield prison. He hung himself with his bed sheets, and that is it. That is Dr. Harold Fred Shipman. I don't know, he's got to be up there for like the most kills by a serial killer, because that's insane. I still can't, like, that is hard for my brain. It's also weird that he was like recreating his mother's death with all of these patients. That is, I don't know. It's strange to me. Like, maybe he should have went to like counseling or therapy after his mom died, because clearly that messed him up in the head. But that is it. Hopefully you enjoyed this. But yes, stay tuned for whatever comes next week. As always, I hope you enjoyed this. I also hope that you have a great rest of your day, a great evening, a great night, a great wherever the hell you are. And I will see you all in my next video. Okie doke. Bye-bye.